Hey, are we live? Good evening and welcome to the monthly mystical. Let's get back to the other comments. There we go. Oh, the headless gremlins at play. Here we go. Yeah, we're on. Yes, it was a bit of a. There is a slight disaster in the background, but hey. Don't worry about it. We'll get it sorted very soon. Anyway, so welcome to the monthly mystical live. I hope you're all going to enjoy this evening. So, actually, now we have a bit of time because we have a couple of technical issues in the background there. So, if you haven't already and you haven't seen it, you need to get 8 A5 pieces of paper. So A4, cut into 4, right? And then, oh, maybe you don't, depends what age you are. And then 8 pieces of tin foil to match the same size. I hope this is correct. And then a toilet roll. Now, I have no idea why we need all that stuff, but it's hilarious. But I'm sure there's a very scientific reason for all this stuff. Lovely. Right. So anyway, so how is everybody doing in this lovely, glorious summer evening? Let me know in the comments how you are. And also, while we're waiting, got a couple of minutes just to wait. Let me know in the comments if you have anything that you would like to talk about, or is there anybody out there that would love to do a talk? And what would it be? Or is there something that anybody would be particularly interested in? I think we've got one coming up on the Druids. I'm just waiting for confirmation on that one. So we'll have a wee talk on the Druids. What else have we got? Oh, we've got a nice one away in November. We're going to do a ritual, which would be really exciting. Oh, hi, Autumn. Nice to see you. Not see you. Nice. Now you have to be a certain age to know what I meant there. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to just... Excellent. Right. Oops. There we go. Good. Hi, Carl. Nice to. What is the word? I always say nice to see you, but I can't see you. It's nice to have your presence here. I think, but I'm never going to say that. I'm always going to go back to nice to see you. Hey, never mind. Right, we just got a couple of minutes just because Steve's not ready. But it's all good. Oh, yes, Carl will know. Well, yes, he will. Nice to see you. To see you, nice. Yeah, I'm not very good at the. Hang on. Sorry, 2 seconds. Just. stage. Hi guys, am I back? Am I back? Apologies. Is speaking very quietly. Oh, hang on, let me turn up the volume. First of all. Whoa, that's loud on my end. Okay, hold on. All right, apologies. We're having a few technical issues this evening. One of them being, I'm not sure what's going on here. So let's see. Oh, okay. We're back. So, right. I'm almost there now. Let me just mute that. Can I mute that? There we go. Muted that so I can see that's done. Woo! Are we still quiet, Carl, or are we okay now? And I've just got to add the presentation again because everything went bam. So now I've got to add it all again. It won't take long. Trust me. Oh, it's there. Okay. That's handy. Right, that's... Oh, we don't want that yet. Remove. Okay, let me know. Here we go. We're almost in business. Just need Steve to give me a thumbs up and then we can get cracking with him and get him on. Is that a thumb? Give me a better thumbs up than that. Is that a thumb? Let me just check. I can see you. Yes. I don't know whether you can hear me. Okay. Right. I think we're almost ready. So anyway, that gave you all time to go and grab your bits of paper and your tin foil and your loo roll. So if you haven't already, please do go and grab it. We're going to have a couple of seconds of introduction, then we're going to get cracking on. I think he's not answering that, so I'm assuming he's ready. Let's go. All good? Thank you. Right. Let's go. So let me introduce, without further ado, Steve Mitchell to the stage. Yay! Or has he gone again? No, I'm not. He's gone. What is going on this evening? It's not even Mercury retrograde yet. It's another month away. Oh, hang on. Yeah, no. That's another, 4 weeks away. Sorry, I won't do that again. Right, he's gone. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, right, so let's talk. What should we have a chat about? I think we need to talk about what you would like from the monthly mystical. Because I've been doing this for a while and we put out some really amazing content. So what I would like to know from... It gets a bad rap. Yeah, it does. Sorry. It really does. I'm going to start showing the little comments on here as well because it's quite funny. Yes, it does get a bad rap. Yes, but so we've done some really good talks in the past. We've done some amazing stuff. If anybody on here would like to add that, I know Carl said he was going to do one. Let's put him on the spot. So if you'd like to have a talk on anything, what would it be about? Obviously, something magical, but what kind of magical stuff? I'm pretty sure I can find a speaker that will help. I don't know where he's gone. Yes, he did. Carl did say he was going to do me a talk. Didn't you, Carl? Oh, he's back. Yay, he's back. Okay, let's get cracking. Carl can answer that one in a sec. Oh, see my suggestion earlier. Okay, let me just quickly find that. Oh, is it that? Coincidences is... Oh, yes. Oh, now. Oh, yes, we've got some good stuff. I could get some for that. Fantastic. Okay, right. Oh my God, he's gone again. Oh no, he's just bent down. Right. Are you ready, Steve? Let's go. Right, I'd like to add to the stage. Hopefully, this time, Steve Mitchell, add to the stage. Good evening! Yay! Finally! Well, we had a few glitches, not just from your end, but from my end. Oh, mine went a bit funny as well. But hey, never mind, we're there. Now you're a little bit, tiny bit blurry.
Are we in? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Well, I don't know. I've had a new that's even blurrier. I can
Well, it
hear
is
you,
now.
yes.
Good. Fantastic.
I had a new internet connection, a new Wi-Fi. They put it in yesterday. It's meant to be about 10 times faster, except it doesn't reach to the top of the house. So they gave me a booster pack, which has stopped working. And there's nothing. I'm running on about 1 bar of signal. So if I drop out, just let me know, or just catch up.
Okay, we'll do that. No problem. But you're okay. So it's not too bad. Oh, wow. Get a refund. Yes. Definitely. Would it be Virgin by any chance? Sorry, Virgin, but I had major problems with their internet for days and days. Look, he's off again. Okay. Yeah, it's Scooby-Doo Mist-Shrouded Steve. Yes, it is. But now he's gone again. A bit like a magician. He's there and then he's not. Right, I'm really hoping that we can get this sorted very quickly. Leaving it to the last minute to sort your internet on was probably, yes, he's gone. It's probably not the best, but hey, we will get there. It's all good. That just means he sent me. I'm in. Okay. No worries. He's going downstairs to see if he can get it better. So we've got a couple more minutes. If anybody hasn't, time to light the incense. It certainly is. Hey, that was a good idea, but I haven't got any up here. Well, I've got tons and tons of lovely resins and whatnot up there, but not all mixed together, and I haven't got the charcoal. I normally have a stick up here, but I haven't got any sticks left. So that's that out the window. But that's usually quite a good idea. Anyway, so apologies, people. There's always something, isn't there? But I think it's all meant to be. It's part of the charm of the monthly mystical live. That's all I can say. Enough to drive you to wine. Please do bear with me. We are going to get there. In the end, we will be there. Just bear with me. So, let's see. What can we chat about? Because I'm not prepared. I wasn't actually prepared. I must start getting a little talk that I can, chat something. I wasn't actually prepared for all this mess this evening. I would have spent all day making robes and sashes and then cooking dinner. So, yeah. I made a brilliant sauce. Let's change it into a cooking channel. It was really nice. A nice creamy garlicky sauce. It was the best. Really nice. Blowing my own trumpet, but hey, there we go. Oh. Shadow tarot. Ooh, shadow tarot. Hang on. I need to Google. What's shadow tarot? Actually, you could tell me. What is shadow tarot? Is that... I don't understand what that is. I had a nice talk from a herbalist today who will probably do it for you. Oh, a herbalist. Oh, what do you mean? Do a talk? Autumn? Well, that'll be cool. Yes. Was she a magical herbalist? Because there is a difference, in my humble opinion. Damn. Missed the bus. Oh, cool. Right. Yeah, that would be really cool. If you know them, you know my email address. If you don't, I can send you it, or I can put it on here actually. Could you possibly get her to contact me? That would be really cool, because we've not had a magical herbalist on. I'm just going to put my there we go. My email address. That would be really cool. Oh, it's Wendy. Are you talking about Wendy? Oh, cool. More healing, but magic. Yes, magical too. Yeah, see now. I'd quite like a bit of healing herbalism. Thing is, I'm not very good at drinking weird stuff. So if there was another way to get topical, like creams and all that, then I'm up for that. Jackie. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, see, Sunday. Yay. Fantastic. Simple question, but detailed subject. Yes, exactly. So what's the Shadow Tarot then? What is Shadow Tarot? Because I don't know what that is. I've not heard of the word. Are we back? Oh, he's back. Hang on. I'm sitting here rabbling away. He's back. Let's go. For the third and final time, we hope. We're going to add to the stage Steve Mitchell. Yay! Please say you're on now.
I am on now.
Yay!
Yeah.
That's better.
Well,
much better.
There you go. There we go. So this is a completely kind of new talk for me, and so normally I just head in and I go bang bang bang, here we go, and I'm a slightly first time through this one, and it's turned out to be an original talk, to say the least. Pardon?
Second time you've done it already with me.
Not this one. Not this talk.
Oh, not this talk. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, sorry. I'm on a different.
I've done loads of Zooms and loads of kind of online talks and things, but this is slightly out of my comfort zone, but it's my own fault. That's what happens when you start researching, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah, getting out your comfort zone is all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how would you like?
The problem is, I haven't got my slides now in front of me, so I can't remember which slide runs to which. So if you give me 30 seconds, I'm going to see if they'll open up on this laptop.
Okay.
And then I'll kind of have a little bit of a crux. Normally I can just do stuff off the top of my head, and everything's absolutely fine. And today, no, righty-ho, let me just see, blah, 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 blah,
So
blah, blah,
I've
blah.
got them on here.
I put it in. Yes?
I've got them on here, but you probably want to control it from your end.
I don't know how to do that.
If you can't do it, then we can just do a thumbs up thing like I had to do before.
That's probably the best
maybe
way.
Just do that. I don't know.
Best way to do it, because I haven't got a copy of it anywhere. But I have got there. So yes, the front page, Cult of the Skulls. There you go, a very lovely front page. So if you go to slide 2, please. How do I change the slides, basically?
There we go. So hopefully you might see something at your end. I know one of the guys that managed to do it from his end before. So have a look at your screen somewhere along the line, and you might be able to just So if I know if I put my cursor over the screen, it says slide 1 and then the little forward arrow. But does it do that on your end?
No, no.
Oh,
I can't see any
right.
forward arrows. So I'll tell you what, you go to slide 2. Oh, just a minute. No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. No, just let's do it the old fashioned way. You go to slide 2.
Right, here we go.
Excellent stuff. Okie dokie. Right. I've done a talk for the last year or two, really, about looking into sacred landscapes. And we've been looking at the way sacred landscapes work, if you like, scientifically, what's going on there. And we've been looking at all kinds of things with electromagnetic energy and sound and how the pineal gland works and loads of stuff. If you haven't been to that talk, come and find it. I don't know if it's online still, otherwise I'll do another one because it's kind of the starter for this talk. Basically, we were looking at the landscape around us and all the sacred sites, and we were discovering that the sacred sites were centered initially around churches dedicated to Mary, which was really super duper exciting. We also discovered a sacred site near us, Hoon Mount, which is a very old burial mound, dates back to at least Viking times, if probably Bronze Age times, probably both. It's been reused in our guess, but no one stuck anything in there to see exactly what it is. So it is a bit of a guess. And very close to there in the sacred landscape is this church here, which is basically St. Michael's, which is Sutton on the Hill. So recently, in the last few months, I thought, right, I better write some of this up, make some notes, take the notes I've got and just reinvestigate them, take some more photographs, recheck out the place. And the interesting thing about St. Michael's is you can just about see is it's not only on a hill, it's very prominent. The hill itself is a bit of a mound, which ties into our previous stories because we were looking at toot mounds, which are basically man-made layered mounds. And we're going to talk about those in 2 seconds. But if you notice, while I was wandering around the church, I noticed something which I'd noticed before, and I decided to pay a little bit more attention to it whilst I was writing up St. Michael's. And I noticed that all the windows, I don't know if you can see that, if you've got a big screen, I've got like a tiny screen here, which is about 2 inches by 1 inch. It's a very small monitor as well. All of the windows and doors have heads, and the heads are, if you like, either side protecting or whatever the apertures. And I was thinking, oh, what's going on here? I wonder if we should investigate this, if I should just do a little bit of a looking into it. So I thought, I'll just add a paragraph, if you like, into my description of St. Michael's on the Mount and see, if it ties in. And that paragraph or two turned into so far about 40 or 50 pages, and that's just kind of note-wise. So this might be a long talk. So if you want to go and get yourself several cups of tea and a pillow and lie yourself down in a very comfortable place, basically what I would say is stop me when you're ready, because it's gone down some alleyways I never even expected it to go. And it's found some stuff that, again, I never really expected to find. And it's taken me into areas that, whilst we'd looked at a little bit in our discoveries, it's kind of opened up a few doors and blown a few cobwebs out and possibly reframed 1 or 2 things that we thought we knew about history. So hopefully your minds will be a little bit messed about. Now, I don't know how long I've actually got, whether it's kind of 3/4 of an hour or an hour. I haven't timed it. I've just kind of gone through it in my head in the car driving home kind of thing. But here we go. So this is St. Michael's. This is Sutton on the Hill. And the first important thing really is to do a very, very quick recap. Now, has anyone brought with them some silver foil and some paper? Good. Okay, I hope everyone else has, because this is a little experiment that we've been doing live and, funnily enough, online. It works just as well.
I have spread that about in the last couple of days, yesterday and whatnot. So hopefully everybody's done it. If not,
if you haven't, Don't worry. just me and you, Jacqueline. Just me and you, and we'll kind of go for it. So let's move on a slide for a second. There we go. So that's kind of the instructions, if you like. Bring with you to the talk. Wherever I do this talk, this will be part of it. And it's an extension, like I say, of a talk and of a kind of way I've worked before. So essentially, first of all, if we haven't already done it, and if you don't know how, you need to learn how to hand dowse. And that's very, very easy. If you put I do need responses from people to this, just to make sure you can at least do this part. If you put your hands about 6 to 8 inches apart, and if you just kind of relax, and if you just focus, I think we did this in our last talk, didn't we, Jacqueline?
We did, yeah.
Anyone who was here last time, you should have done this already. And if you were with us last time, I asked you a very, very simple question. The question was, and it's a very simple question, what sensation, and that's very important, what sensation can you feel between your hands? And if anyone can type, are we in, how do we get public chat onto here?
Well, at the moment, oh, hang on. Yeah, we've got Tingle from Isam. But yeah, basically Tingle.
So I can't see that. Can I get to see that?
Oh, can't you see it on your screen? If you
I just see a private chat.
Oh, you can go on to a different one because I'm on the comments. So is it? Whoops, hello. Whoops. You should be able to see a comments on there. No.
Oh, yes, comments.
Yeah, and then they should all come up. Are you seeing them?
Okay. So yes, Isam has mentioned a tingle. Anything else from anyone else? I think it's me and you, Jackie. Let's go for it together. And if anyone else wants to, I can just see one response: tingle. The Celts loved a skull. Yeah, most of the Celts loved a skull as long as it was in their own head, not decapitated, lying on the floor in front of them. Is that
okay? Right, what are we doing now? Yeah, so
right. So, what do you feel, Jacqueline? Let's do it together, and anyone else who's joining in will get the hang of this. Go for it.
Yes. So I've got a tingle and I've got a heat. I've got heat as well.
Okay, so what we're sensing here and what we talked about last time, to cut the story very short, because like I say, the last talk was probably an hour and we got to a certain point. To cut the story very short, what we're sensing is electromagnetic energy. Don't just use energy, because energy tells you sweet nothing. Energy can be sound, it can be light, it can be all kinds of things. But the thing that we're focusing in on now is electromagnetic energy, okay? So the question is, it's a very quick question. And like I say, I'm actually jumping the gun a huge amount compared to the last workshop. With our silver foil, and I did have my other camera plugged in, but it seems to interfere with the microphone on this laptop, and I haven't figured out how to reconfigure it. With our foil, what I'd like you to do is essentially, I'll do it for you so you can see. With your foil, do you feel a similar tingle heat, or do you feel more or less? Does that make sense?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, I'm feeling heat.
Okay, good stuff. Righty-ho. And then we take a little piece of paper, which hopefully you've cut out of your A4, and we do a little test on the piece of paper. Do we sense any tingling, heat, pressure, whatever words you come up with to describe that from said piece of paper?
Just the paper?
Yes, just the paper.
Okay, just the paper. Actually, I'm getting heat. I don't know when I'm getting heat from there, but not so much.
Not so much. Okay. Let's put the paper and the silver foil together so they make a kind of half sandwich of silver foil and paper. Is that all right? And then what you need to do is bring your hands in and see what.
Come on, guys! You need to help me out here in case I'm doing it wrong. Let's have some answers on there, please. Right.
Tingles.
Right. What we're doing?
Pressure, paper, and silver foil at the same time. Tingles.
Which way round?
Doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter at all. That's the wonder of it all.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
No.
What's that? What is it you're saying?
She said voltaic cell. We'll come to that in a
Cell.
minute. Stop
Okay.
trying to be so clever.
We have a
Not
clever
quite.
person in the room.
It's not
Cleverer than
quite.
me,
I will tell
clearly.
you, it's not quite a voltaic cell, but you're in the right area. What are you sensing there?
Well, I'm getting my heat.
More or less?
Oh, hang on. Oh, okay. Yeah, a bit more.
Okay, good. So what we're going to do is we're going to start building our sandwich up. So we're going to add some paper around the foil.
Oh, hello, Matthew. Matthew said, hang on, I'll put it up in this one in case you can't see
Matthew
it on
said
yours.
capacitor. I can see it. Yep.
Oh, you can see it now. So maybe I'll just take that off because I know it's on YouTube, so everybody can see what's going on. Right.
Okay.
So what am I doing now? Another paper on top of
Paper and
my
foil. Check
my
it out.
sandwich. Yeah. Oh, that does actually feel more.
Good. Put silver foil in, so you're now doubling it up. 2 pieces of silver foil, 2 pieces of paper.
Oh, sugar. Slightly rip that bit of thin foil there. Right, and then, hold on. So, yeah. Oh, it's warmer.
Excellent. Keep doubling it up. More foil, more paper in layers.
Okay. Paper. This is very exciting. I've got this really thick, tin foil, which is now decided to stick together. Right, there we go. Tin foil. So I'm on another layer of tin foil. Oh yes, hotter.
Yeah, and hopefully you're starting to get an effect there.
Shall I keep going?
Yeah, you could go up to 8. If you've all got 8 pieces of paper and 8 pieces of foil, let's make a sandwich. A big quadruple decker sandwich.
Okay, let's keep going then. Guys, are you all doing this? Matthew? Yep, building the charge, yeah.
More layers, more charge. Sort of.
It's all posture, Steve. What?
I don't know what she's on about. Posturizing. Let's not worry too much. Anyway.
Okay, hang on. Yeah.
Definitely
more. On the next layer. Oh, yep. Oh. Okay, shall I just carry on to the end?
Well, if you like, if you can go up to 8, it's up to you. It's all kind of get there. Layering. That's the idea. We want to create layers. Now I've gone up to 8. 8 is a good number. You could keep going forever. Matthew, what we were looking at really was what is happening in a sacred site, and very specifically at sacred sites, particularly 2 hills and hills that sacred sites are built on, we find a layering. Near us in Tutbury, we have a layering caused by glacial till, which basically the glaciers have been butts of rock down and they've created a filament of kind of layers, and we find this exact response. So in sacred sites, what we're finding essentially is an electromagnetic response. Now, it is way more like a capacitor, as in it needs energy into it, than it is a battery, if that makes sense. However, in certain circumstances, it can work as either. That gets complicated. I'm not going to go into there because that's not really totally part of my talk. That was part of my previous talk, and it probably took us an hour or so to get there. What we've done is we've jumped. Okay. What we've ended up is with these layers. So what's really going on is that a sacred site is essentially layers, and we can sense those layers as we walk onto a sacred site. Our body reacts, and the question really is, what part of our body is relaxing? What part of our body is reacting? And essentially, without, again, going down the whole 2-hour workshop, the bit that we kind of focus in on in here is our pineal gland. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Now, our pineal gland is responsible, if you like, for a number of things. One of the things it's responsible is for our sense of space, sense of place, where we are, because it ties into the whole electromagnetic frequency of the whole planet. So on that level, it kind of ties into, we know where we are. Does that make sense? We're home because we are home. We are here because we are here, and we are here because we're aware of the north-south, the magnetic flow, and when we're in a sacred site, that kind of starts to kick off. The second thing the pineal gland does that has been super duper measured is our sense of time, particularly relative time, but particularly kind of the big time, if you like, and more importantly, the daytime and the nighttime. If we took our pineal glands out, we would be floundering around. We literally wouldn't know if we closed our eyes where we were. And more importantly, we wouldn't know what time of day it was. We would have no literal link. So if we were stuffed in a cave somewhere, in a hole somewhere, we would be just absolutely lost. It would be like sensory deprivation gone mad. Okay. So when we go to a sacred site, all of this stuff is kicking off. And what we find is that we're starting to make a connection that is way bigger than just the sacred site, because the sacred site acts, if you like a capacitor. It is pumping into us now because we are reacting with it. It is reacting with ourselves. What we start to then do, if you know also the pineal gland is our third eye, our kind of connection, if you like, to the other world, to the bigger world out there, is we start to kind of make connections, if you like, on a spiritual level. So this is where we get the concept of connecting, if you like, to a god or a goddess, or maybe spirit of the landscape, all kind of kicked off by all of this stuff that's around us. So it's part of a bigger mechanism. And the sacred site itself kind of builds up a very specific frequency range that kicks off specific frequency responses in the brain. I don't know if I've got that on a slide. I'm just running freeform because it's far easier than me jumping all over the place. So essentially, when we stand, shall we say, on the top of a sacred site, which are on hills, here's a hill here, what we've postulated up until now is that essentially, because it's a hill, it's kind of peaking, it's rounding. Our Tutbury Hill's got like a whole mass of this stuff going on in it. It focuses it. And if someone builds on top of that hill a sacred site like a toot mound or a church or a stone circle, again, we've done experiments on this and have to play around it and sensed it and got the old pendulums out. I've got a whole, you can't see it because I haven't got my camera that moves around, but we've got a whole kind of bunch of lovely equipment in here to sense various things and to test all of this out. If I was upstairs, I'd be a bit more relaxed and have that there, that there, that there, that running there, that's plugged in there, but it ain't. So we're just going to have to go and believe me. So a sacred site is essentially, like you say, it's like a capacitor, but it's a capacitor that works with our pineal gland and allows us, if you like, to make that connection beyond. You might, like I say, call it a connection to God, goddess, to the sky gods, if you like, because we're on the top of a hill. That's fairly obvious, isn't it? So I was kind of wondering, like you do, how do we take this experiment further? Could an EMF, if used over a sacred site, affect the characteristics of the sacred site? Yes, basically. So the point is, Matthew, if we go to a sacred site, we are already interacting with that sacred site. Does that make sense? So we, as I'm going to use electromagnetic beings, we are plugging ourselves in there. If a bunch of us go and stand in a circle, we've done circle experiments with stones and things in the last talk, we find that we start generating and changing the energy there. So it's as if the sacred site is ready to receive humans. And that's quite important, because without us in there, it just does its own stuff, whatever its own stuff is. But once we put the human factor in there, then we start having an impact. We can look at kind of how those sacred sites talk to each other, how they develop particular frequencies. We can look at, therefore, based on that, what visions we might get, what perceptions we might get. So some people find that, for example, haunted places have more EMF. And there's a lot of bollocks going around at the moment on the telly with people with EMF meters trying to do various things and then speaking to their EMF meters as though the EMF meter is the spirit itself. I've left it upstairs, but I've got a lovely, lovely little device which basically kind of generates sound and generates EMF and goes woo, 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 all over the place, which in modern haunting parlance is called a REM pod. In my parlance, it's called a machine that makes EMF. And basically it reacts to EMF as well. So if you bring anything EMF, i.e. cameras, Wi-Fi, walkie-talkies, any kind of things that you might see people wandering around with quite a lot when they're doing these programs about most haunted places, they're all kicking off these things because they haven't. Anyway, that's another story. I could go off and I've got a whole set of experiments based around how do we create a haunted place and how do we actually find what a real haunted place is. That's another thing. So we kind of created a mini sacred space here. And as I say, it's a mini sacred space on a hill. And my concept is, well, if we're on the top of a hill and we've got this connection to the sky gods or whatever you want to do, I wonder what happens underneath the hill. Well, there's only one kind of hill that you can get into, and that is a hill that's got a cave or possibly a burial, but we can't, generally speaking, get into the burials. So let's see what happens. And this is new. This is new. No one else will have done this yet, including me, by the way. What happens in a cave situation? Okay. So what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have a little bit of a play with this. We're going to create a cave using a toilet roll, because that way we can get in and out the other end. And what you're going to do is essentially wrap your toilet roll with your sandwich. Does that make sense? Can you see that?
Yes. Now my problem is I've got a whole toilet roll, so I'm going to go and get. Yes, because you didn't say toilet roll tube. You said toilet roll. Hold on, let me go and get one.
Okay.
I'll be back.
You know, yes, grammar's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Yes. Yes. Anyway, so those who are still with us, who haven't had to go and get a toilet roll or had to peel off the entire covering of the toilet roll to find the inside tube, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the tube and create effectively a tabletop version of a sacred cave. Now, the top of this sacred cave, if you want to pop your hands in, shouldn't really change. It should essentially have the same characteristics as your flat layer. I don't know, maybe it doesn't. If anyone can tell me whether simply putting the old paper and silver paper sandwich over the top of a rolled up piece of newspaper, effectively a toilet roll core, changes. I don't know. Anyone? I'll wait for Jacqueline to get back. I don't know if she's gone to use that toilet roll all in one go.
No, we're all right. I've got one.
Okay, so what we're investigating, Jackie, is whether or not simply wrapping our toilet roll in our sandwich that we've made changes that sandwich itself, first of all.
So are we wrapping it round or popping it inside? Or just around?
Oh, round the outside. Round the outside.
Oh, round the outside.
Yes.
Round the outside.
Yes.
Okay.
Round the outside. Like the Buffalo
Girls.
Girls.
I thought of that as well.
Okay.
Now what?
Now, so the first test is, has the sandwich, shall we changed simply by curving it around a structure?
So what am I looking for? The energy
on the
of it?
Yeah, on the outside, the same thing that we were sensing earlier on.
I can feel the heat. Yeah.
Yeah, same. So here's the question. What about the inside, i.e. our cave simulation? So the first thing you can do is you can put your hand to the tube itself. What do you feel? I'm trying not to kind of suggest too much, but what do you feel at the mouth of our cave, shall we say, at the hole at the end of the tube? Do you feel anything?
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling hotter or warmer than it
Okay,
was
even
before.
warmer. That's interesting. Okie dokie. Righto. And this will be a bit weird, but go with the flow because we
Oh,
can't put
goodness.
ourselves into a tube ourselves. So we're going to have to be very sensitive with our fingers. And you're going to basically pop a finger in and see, oh, I'm getting a result. What it feels like to your finger, putting your finger in that toilet roll cave.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Yeah, it's making me finger nice and warm. Hey, that's handy for winter. Can we patent that and make
I
we
want,
could
I
have
want
like
some notes on that if you're going to do any patenting. Any patenting, I want some notes on that. So
look at that.
essentially, what we're finding
Yeah.
out is that the tube inside our artificial cave, because that was what I was interested in. I don't know why I was. I just wanted to know what was happening inside. I thought the only way I can work this out is by creating some artificial thing, by going to a place and measuring it. I love tabletop experiments because you can do them at home and you go, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you can tell the difference by taking your foil and your paper away, and you should feel it's kind of flattish, basically. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Righty ho. So what I'd like you to do now is to move from slide 3, which is basically showing that kind of toilet roll kind of stuff. And I'm going to go to slide. Oh, okay. Slide is it should have Wayland Smithy at the top left-hand side.
There you go.
Have we got it?
Yep.
Excellent stuff. So let's imagine in our heads, top of a cave, top of a hill. We're having a wonderful experience. It's a connection experience to what we might call God, goddess, sky gods, whatever you want to be connected to, essentially. And inside the cave, we're going chthonic. We're going right into the earth itself. And if you imagine it's dark in there, at the moment it's dark anyway, we're going to change that later, except we won't be able to do an experiment on that yet. That'll be the next series of experiments and talks. So we're going into our cave. And again, our pineal gland is kicking off. But this time, instead of connecting, shall we say, to the universe, connecting to the sky gods, it is now connecting to Earth itself. It's connecting into Earth spirit. It's connecting into that very kind of inside. So what we've got going on the inside and outside is what we might call an initiatory process. Does that make sense? Start at the top, we connect, and we bring in those who've worked magic will know how to do this. You bring in the god or the goddess, you bring in the sky gods, you bring in spirit. Okay, you go into the cave, depths of the cave, and inside the cave, you're then connecting with the earth. You're connecting with the earth gods or goddesses, and you're having a kind of self experience now. Okay, and it's quite an important experience. It's an experience that people will have had over millennium. And this is why caves themselves become as important as the sacred mounds, and even more important if they're stuffed inside a sacred mound. So what we have now is, if you imagine in your heads, maybe if we can have a bit of a cult going on, a bit of a kind of bunch of people rather than just the one person who are maybe kind of initiating, starting this process. And this process becomes a process of connection. And then it becomes a process of letting go. And it becomes a process of going into the earth and then coming back out and being reborn, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. So this
Definitely.
here, as you can see, a whole bunch of pictures. Wayland Smithy, West Kennet Long Barrow. I can't even read because unfortunately my screen's too small. But there's a bunch of cavey kind of things, and some of them are in fact, I think they're all. I chose them all. Yes, they are. They're all on sacred spaces, and they all have sacred mounds around them as well. So what we have is an initiating process. Now, what I'm saying here is not that this is what they were built for solely. Okay, so everything that I talk about today, we can layer. It's part of a story. Maybe it's a different part of a story because we've added a little bit of experience into here now. We know what's going on. If anyone is kind of getting a buzz or a tingle, oh, bam, I'll have to check that one out. Barbara Caves. They're quite cool, aren't they? And if everyone's getting a buzz or a tingle, you might kind of notice that kind of thing going off on here. Anyone?
So Paul's doing it downstairs, and he said that I don't know exactly what he said, but he'll probably come back up and tell me something. He put this on the front of his head.
Oh, right.
And he felt,
okay.
Yeah, and he felt a big like buzz from it.
Big buzz.
I think so. Yeah, something like
so
that. I'm sure he'll come and tell me.
Good, excellent stuff. This, as I say, ties directly into kind of what we're looking at with shall we say, sacred spaces. Let's just for a second go on to our next slide, shall we?
Ooh. Should be coming up for you any second now.
Okay, this really explains what I've just kind of been saying. And the additional kind of bit along here is checking out what the skull itself is doing. Can you see, by the way, on the left-hand side picture, wedged right deep in the middle there is the pineal gland. I'm just trying to see if I've done some more with that slide, but I think that's for later on. Just to kind of start to build a few layers on top of each other. So the pineal gland is in there. And then the skull around the side, outside is very, very interesting because our skull essentially is a great EMF conductor. So essentially it kind of enhances this process. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and also, again, it interacts with specifically electromagnetic fields, okay, because of its makeup, because of the way it kind of is really. And essentially, it's the carbon, the calcium carbonate kind of part of that is important in that process. So all of this, if you like, put into a little bit of a package, kind of takes us on a little bit of a journey. And I'm speaking slowly because I'm trying to find my set of slides and where they've gone so that I can see, yes, we're heading into there. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, please.
There you go.
So as I say, what I was really, really interested here is essentially toot mounds. This is something we've already explored. We find them all over the place. There's a proliferation. This is just a quick example, culled off of the old kind of Google, of various different toot hills, toot mounds, toot toes in various parts of the country. Again, this is really part of my first talk, to be honest with you, but we need it in here because that's our hill, if you like. That's our tootiness. What I was quite interested in was I was thinking, well, I wonder, has anyone kind of compared these toot hills to anything else? Possibly, for example, do they also look like, to anyone, a skull or a head? So if you go to the next slide.
Okay.
Yippity do. Here we go. And all of a sudden, loads of them all over the place. Not only do we have toot hills everywhere, we have various heads. Now, I've shown you on purpose because we think of a head. We often come across a head, shall we say, as a headland. So Hengistbury Head on the right there, Dorset, and that's a headland, if you like. But if you notice, they've all got the same characteristics as our toot hills. They're all rounded. They're all kind of, so it's kind of giving us an indication that maybe skulls and toot hills and that kind the shape ties together. Maybe the whole combination, we go inside, we're a skull inside, we're a head inside a hill. Oh, we haven't got to that yet. Terribly sorry. Oh, I liked Skull Hill on Mars, by the way. That was just a bit of a funny addition. You can see that on the bottom right there. But you know, hey, it looks like a skull again. This is the whole deal. Let's go on to our next slide. Now, this is getting rather exciting, this next slide. So here's a Skull Hill, another one. And the Skull Hill, you can just about see in the middle there, it's got a cave. Can you see that? Now, this is quite an old hill. So the cave, unfortunately, has fallen to bits a bit. And there's one or two kind of recessions. And some people say, oh, that looks like a bit like a skull. So maybe that's called Skull Hill. Maybe it's called Skull Hill because it's a hill that looks like a skull and that it kind of impacts on us in some way. So there we have a kind of magical place. You can imagine just there some kind of initiatory process, maybe a kind of birth, rebirth, death kind of thing going on there, a connection to the god and the goddess, going into the cave, spending some time in the cave, getting in touch with the earth, and then kind of being reborn there. And that's my kind of postulation at this point in the talk, that Skull Hills themselves are kind of giving us a little bit of a clue, a little bit of an indication, shall we say, what's really kind of going on. There's a reason for that. And this particular Skull Hill is a rather nice Skull Hill because it fits into the landscape, the sacred landscape around there. You can have a quick look at the sacred landscape around there if you want to in the next slide. The sacred landscape around there has been used for thousands of years. It's got whole cave systems, churches, temples to Aphrodite have been built there, sacred pools. If you've been to my previous talk, you know how important pools and rivers are. We've got a river running down there. We've got a cave of spirits, all kinds of stuff there. But up here in the top, very top, you can see our Skull Hill, which we just showed you a picture of, located within the sacred landscape around there. So let's hang on to that moment, and we're going to come back into here. So we're going to have a quick look, journey through skulls in history, okay? And more importantly, how long they've been used, or maybe how long they've been venerated. So if you go on to the next slide. There we go. Oh, these are lovely. I really love these particular skulls here. We can pretty much, in fact, actually, unfortunately, I've gone beyond this already since I kind of wrote this down a couple of weeks ago. I've just found something else. I think I put it right at the very end. So I'll mention that at the very end. Essentially, initially, I kind of managed to date kind of skulls being important back to 9,000 years ago. So essentially, the top skull just there, the Jericho one, this is 9,000 years old. It was covered in shells, probably artificially shaped as well. So it was a special skull. And more importantly, it is one of 7. And they were essentially found in a room in Ain Gaza near Amman in Jordan. Okay. Again, tracing through those pictures there, the second picture there, you can see on the top right, yes, I've put a little bit of an annotation so you can read that as well. Basically, it says there, that's from the tale, the epic tale of Aquat. It's a Canaanite myth. And basically, originally, you know, now it's what we know as Syria. And that one's, again, approximately 13,000 years BCE up there. And the myth, as you can see, immortal. I can't actually read it because my screen's too small, but you can read that. You can read it. It's all adds into our little storyline that we're kind of developing here. Okie dokie, momentum papari. Oh yes, some more skulls in there. This one bottom left was found in Pompeii, and as you can see, the skull is very important in that picture. Basically, it's some of you might recognize the triangle bit at the top. Anyone? Put your hands up. Yes. And a labella. Basically, this goes back to AD 40, and it is an Egyptian measuring instrument with a plumb line.
Oh, okay.
So, some of you thought it was something else, didn't you? That's also important that you thought it was something else. And it's sitting perched on a butterfly, which is essentially a symbol of the soul. And it's also perched on the Wheel of Fortune. So it's telling us kind of how people have regarded skulls. They've had them kind of in their rooms, if you like. They've been there. And more importantly, they're something special. They're something magical. They're part of some kind of magical kind of ceremony, if you like, that involves balance. It involves the soul. It involves fortune. We'll find this kind of cropping up like absolutely crazy. And then just on the right-hand side there, we'll see a picture. Does anyone know who that picture is? And the answer is basically it's Herodias's daughter Salome. Okay. And we all know that. Pardon?
I didn't know that. Carry on.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, we all know the story of Salome, don't we? She has a bit of a dance before Herod, and Herod's so pleased. He says, "You can have whatever you like." And essentially, her mother says, "Well, ask him for the head of John the Baptist," which obviously includes cutting it off. So essentially, the head of John the Baptist is presented on a plate. We've come across there. And even better than that, allegedly, the head is still in the church of San Silvestro in Rome. So, although actually the Cathedral of Amiens claims possession, and so does Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. So the head could be around. But it's an important story, and I'm going to come back to that story. Hang on to it, okay? We'll find some more scully kind of head kind of things on the next. I can hear lots of talking in the background. I don't know if that's directed at me or not.
I have no idea where that's coming from.
That's okay. That's all right. I don't mind people kind of joining in. So here's another kind of set of interesting skull-related, shall we say, skullduggery. So the Mabinogion, which is written around about the 11th, 12th century, essentially the story is very simple. The Irish king marries Bran's sister, who's very important, Bran. His sister Branwen tells us already that it's something to do kind of a bit sacred, a bit fiery. And the half-brother is rather angry about it, and he basically mortally wounds Bran. In a fit of, I don't know, apologies or whatever, he tells the survivors after this kind of big battle and fight to cut off Bran's head and take it to Britain. And along the way, annoyingly or otherwise, the head carries on speaking and talking and gives various guidance and wisdom, and essentially is buried after a bit of a journey in White Hill. Now, White Hill is an interesting kind of place. Most people assume that White Hill is the Tower of London, as you can see sitting at the top there. I've kind of come up with a couple of other possibilities. White Hill essentially could be the Whitechapel Mount. And interestingly, Whitechapel allegedly takes its name, Whitechapel, by the way, White Hill, all stuff, and takes its name from basically St. Mary Magdalene Church, okay, which is dedicated to Mary and covered in lime whitewash. So that's another possibility of a place where Bran's head might be located at the moment. Okay, now let's go on to our next slide. Heads and skulls, heads and skulls. Oh, yes. So heads and skulls have been used within the Christian church, as we can see, as I can't even pronounce that word now, reliquaries. It's easier for you to say than I can. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of them there, a whole bunch of them. There's one dating to around about 1180, which is the head reliquary of Saint Eustace, which is at the moment in the British Museum now. Very interestingly, it was a kind of wooden head covered in silver gilt and gems and various stuff. And essentially they just kind of kept it like that until someone around about in the 1950s decided they'd have a peek inside. So they opened it up and they found loads of bone, fragments of bone, wrapped in a cloth and vellum with the title Relic Tituli. Titled relic, interestingly. Okay. Pope Alexander is in there. St. Catherine of Siena, she died and had her head cut off in 1347, and that was kept in the Basilica Caterina San Domenico. Interestingly enough, we find quite a lot of so-called saints dying, having their heads cut off. Their heads are kept and the bodies are thrown away. There's interesting, isn't it? So the head was more important than the body. Why would that be? I'll come to that in a minute. In there, have we got Oliver Plunkett? Oh, yes, there he is.
Top right.
Yes, not looking terribly well. Some of them look better than others, don't they? He was hung and drawn and quartered in 1681, and his head was given to a bunch of nuns, basically. We've got Saint Waltrude there. Her head was separated again from her body. And has kind of moved all over the place, and then finally in Church, Colliegate Church, Mons. Saint Valentine. There's an interesting one, isn't there? In the Rome's Basilica de St. Miria in Cosmedin, we find allegedly the head of Saint Valentine. And then I think I've got there as well. I'm just double checking. Yes, there they are. The heads of Saint Peter and Saint Paul. Basically, again in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, whoever's talking, could you perhaps turn your microphone off? Or maybe not. Are you able to mute them?
There's nobody to mute, so I don't know where it's coming from.
Oh, it's so weird, isn't it?
It's a bit strange. Yeah, it might be from my YouTube, but I've muted that, so I'm not sure why it's happening.
Maybe. Anyway, we'll get back to the story. That's absolutely spookily dookly. Okay, so essentially the church thought it was a jolly good idea to kind of keep the heads, throw the bodies away, and kind of the heads were, if you like, not only a representation of the holiness of the person that they kind of belonged to, but essentially they were kind of to be venerated, and that's quite important. So that's kind of noted in that little bit down the bottom there, the Council of Trent in 1545, venerate the heads. Shall we pop down to the next story down below, the next? So beheading as a capital punishment. First known depiction of the beheading as a capital punishment was Egyptian, 31st century BC. If we can see that just there on that little stele just there. Adds into our little storyline, if you like. Ancient Rome and Greece basically decided that actually decapitation was possibly the most honorable form of death. Okay, and it was reserved in the Middle Ages in Europe for nobles and royalty. Okay, we found 8,000 years ago human skulls, basically with remnants of wooden stakes through them. So that was in a dried lake bed. And we know, obviously, that the heads of criminals were mounted on London Bridge from about 1300 onwards. And, oh, yes, we've got Medusa sneaking in there, another famous head being cut off. Basically, in that one, in the Greek hero story, Perseus used a head to essentially turn onlookers to stone. That's rather nice. And then, oh yes, Mima. Mima's head was cut off in the Norse stories. And basically it carried on talking again and gave counsel. So we've got lots of stories about how important heads are, how they're venerated, and how they talk, and how possibly they're linked into the future and into fortune. And the other story most people will be quite aware of with heads is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Essentially, the Green Knight appears at Christmas and kind of basically says to all the rest of the knights, anyone who can chop my head off, come and meet me in a year's time, and that you only get one go at it. So Gawain basically chops off the Green Knight's head, and unfortunately the Green Knight picks it up and says, right, see you in a year's time. Right. Whilst I was going through this, I was quite interested in how long would a decapitated head stay alive. So if you can go to your next show, your next slide. Is that the next slide? Oh, it is. Let's hang on into there then. Yes. So essentially a decapitated head basically can... well, there's a story essentially about a revolutionary, Charlotte Corday, and she was executed by guillotine in 1793. And allegedly someone lifted up her head and slapped both cheeks. And onlookers reckon that she kind of looked a bit flush and looked a bit angry. I seem to be missing a slide. Let me just go up and just double check that I haven't got it on the previous one. No. Oh, there's a shame. I don't know where that's got to. It's disappeared off. Oh, it's two. So why is it two down? What have I missed? Have I jumped? What slide are we on? I'm terribly sorry. As I said, this is the first time I've run it, and it was all.
Is this the one that you need?
It's about two down. Yes. Let me just see. It should look like oh yes.
The guillotine and. Is it the guillotine and the skull?
Yeah, guillotine. Charlotte. There she is. There's her skull, allegedly. I say allegedly because there's quite a possibility that it wasn't actually her skull. But hey-ho. So we know that kind of people have described what happens, shall we say, after death when they've been resuscitated, which suggests that there's something that goes on a little bit better. Certain studies have shown that activity in the brain after the heart has stopped beating carries on for 30 minutes. The delta waves are often the last to kind of, shall we say, die back, for want of a better word. And again, we think maybe these might kind of tie into the pituitary gland. They're the low kind of waveforms. And possibly tie into when people have done tests on different sort of waveforms, they seem to be the sort of delta waves seem to be the thing that's quite active when people are meditating or when they're being intuitive and so forth. Okay, now I'm going to have to work out which order things come in next. Oh yeah, can we go up a slide or two? To the one that we did have. Yes, there's the one there. Okay, rightio, some more interesting things. Yes. Oh, yes. So more heads. We're heading into Crusader territory now, and the heads. And essentially, one of the interesting things was that in the Crusades, part of their kind of weaponry, if you like, was heads. So essentially, they'd cut off their enemies' heads and bung them over the walls and scare the living daylights out of them. Probably to say this might happen to you, but probably also because, there was something about someone's head coming at you. It's not very, very nice. According to the Gesta Francorum, basically, the Crusaders were killing and slaying, even up to the Templar of Solomon, where the slaughter was so great, I'm quoting now, that our men waded in blood up to their ankles. Our men hurled the heads of the killed far into city, that the Turks might be more terrified. And they also put the heads on spikes, paraded them around the walls to strike terror into the hearts of the Turkish. And I really totally suspect that these heads were brought home. And as you might notice on the right-hand side there, there's a lot of pubs that are named after heads, particularly, the Turkish head, the Saracen's head, the King's head, all this kind of stuff, and ties into a head story rather nicely. So were those pubs originally, was there a head somewhere, a skull, a head of a Saracen or whatever, located at these pubs? Who knows? I think they were. Anyway. Right. We're going to head into the realms of the Knights Templar. This is where the story gets exciting. Following the whole kind of skulls story, finding lots of different things about skulls. As we see, they're kind of venerated, they're used as weapons, they're used as pub signs, you name it. We come across a strange bunch of people called the Knights Templar. Can you go to the next slide, please? There we have them. The Fellows of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. They were a military order of the Catholic faith and allegedly founded in 1118 to defend pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem. And that essentially is the story everyone knows about the Knights Templar. That's what they were there for, to protect the pilgrim way up to Jerusalem and to defend. And they were as we say, a military order, a holy military order, wearing the cross upon their chest. So we go down a little bit. You should find a slide. I'm going to have to reorder these, but anyway, that essentially has got Guillaume de Tyre in one corner and the Temple of Solomon in the other corner. That's the one. Brilliant. Excellent stuff. Smashing. Great stuff. So, what do we know about the Knights Templar in reality? Well, the information I just told you, essentially, is taken from the writings of a historian writing between 1175 and 1185, approximately 50 years later. So there wasn't much written about them. They were established in 1118 by Hugh de Payne, who was a nobleman from Champagne. And essentially, this is where it gets a little bit strange. The Knights Templar, essentially, they turn up at Jerusalem. They turn up at the King of Jerusalem's house, palace, and there's 8 of them. No more, no less, 8 of them. And they basically turn up and say, look, we're going to look after your roads and highways. We're going to keep them safe. And for some reason, the king goes, oh, yeah, that sounds a good idea. More importantly, I'm going to give you the royal palace, the quarters in the royal palace for yourself. You can live there if you like. Now, interestingly enough, the royal palace was built on the Temple of Solomon. So some of you will have heard stories how these knights did nothing. For 9 years, they did nothing. They admitted no new members. They apparently lived in poverty. Okay, and in this temple grounds, what were they doing? Okay, there was a royal historian who lived at the time, the royal historian effectively of the king, and for some reason he doesn't mention them. Doesn't mention how these chaps turned up and were protecting the pilgrims, what they were doing or anything. There's all kinds of, therefore, mysterious stories all about the Knights Templar. What were they doing? How were they doing it? And why? And why did they essentially spend 9 years recruiting no new members and apparently doing nothing? One of the stories is that maybe they were hunting for something. Maybe they were seeking something. Maybe they were trying to find some kind of treasure. I don't know if you've come across that one. It's very interesting. Have we got another slide? We have got another slide. We can have a look at the next slide, please. So in 1127, as I say, a few years later, not many years later, they basically pack their bags up and go back to Europe. So they don't seem to have done much in the way of managing to protect pilgrims. I don't know how 9 or 8 knights are going to protect pilgrims in that time. They don't seem to have done anything at all, allegedly. And yet they're welcomed home by the abbot of Clairvaux, St. Bernard, who kind of is a bit of a shadowy figure in their story when you look into it. And he writes this tract, this piece, in praise of the new knighthood. And within a few months, essentially orchestrated by him, they're incorporated as a military religious order by the church. Now, top that, they managed to pop over to the Pope, Pope Innocent II, and having done absolutely nothing apart from, sit around apparently, allegedly guarding the area, they get a paper bull, essentially, in 1139, which basically says that they will owe no allegiance to secular or ecclesiastical authorities other than the Pope. So, isn't that rather interesting? These guys here, Knights Templars, you're going to ask me in a minute what has this got to do with skulls. We're going to find out. These Knights Templar chappies here do nothing, and yet they not only get accepted by the King of Jerusalem, they get accepted by the Pope, who declares that they are so powerful, having done nothing, that they owe no allegiance to anyone other than him. Isn't that weird? What do you think, Jacqueline? You've been very quiet.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep myself on mute just in case there's any interference. But yes, definitely. That's,
yeah. So,
but that's very weird. Yes,
it's very weird and very interesting. And of course, the problem is, as I say, the historians of the time either say nothing at all, or 50 years later they say, they were there basically guarding Jerusalem. So that's what we know. That is interesting, isn't it, in itself, that they didn't do anything and yet they got all of this kind of credation, essentially. What we really know is that the 1118 was maybe a made-up figure, because there's a letter from the Comte de Champagne, who's basically writing a letter to the bishop to say he's going to join essentially the Knights Templars. He calls them the Milice de Christ, but they were the Knights Templars. Okay, and St. Bernard kind of flows around here, and all of a sudden, after this date, after 1127, both the Cistercians under St. Bernard and the Knights Templars suddenly start to grow incredibly wealthy. Now, bear in mind, as I say, they're meant to have sworn to be absolutely the poor knights. Do you know what I mean? They're not meant to have money. They're not meant to have own things. And yet, all of a sudden, all of these guys start to get wealthy. So, what were they doing in Jerusalem? And, more important, who was in charge? So, if you'd like to go down to the next slide, we're going to throw a few ideas into the mix. So the first thing I'm going to throw into the mix is the Dead Sea Scrolls, in particular a scroll known as the Copper Scroll, simply because it's made out of copper. Ta-da! Okay, this wasn't found until 1952. It was found by archaeologists rooting around when they were looking at all the Dead Sea Scrolls and all the sort of Essene stuff. They found something called the Copper Scroll. Okay. Now, the funny thing about the Copper Scroll is they were hidden approximately 70 AD. So a long time ago, long time before the old Knights Templars. But people have used them as a kind of indication that there might have been treasure. And more importantly, the Copper Scroll essentially describes the so-called treasure of King Solomon's temple. For example, in the ruin of the Valley of Angkor, beneath the staircase that ascends towards the east at a distance of 40 brick tiles, there is a silver chest and its vessels weighing 17 talents. God, that's a lot of silver, isn't it? Bet if you'd heard about that, you'd go hunting for it, wouldn't you? Where would you hunt? Any ideas?
No.
No, there's a problem with the Copper Scroll. So everyone uses it as a kind of proof that maybe the Knights Templars knew about all this treasure. Maybe they knew where it was hidden. Well, if you can tell me where the Valley of Angkor is and where the ruin is and where the staircase ascends towards the east and where the brick tiles are, bear in mind this is 1,000 years later when we're doing the old Knights Templar stuff, then you're a better person than me. And essentially, this is the Copper Scrolls in a nutcase. Every single kind of element within there is a detailed of where treasure is hidden and what sort of treasure is hidden, except in the best stories ever, there's no X and no spot to mark the X. In the meantime, of course, since around about 70 AD, Jerusalem has been sacked and rampaged by pretty much everyone and their dog. So one assumes that, 1,000 years later, the likelihood of the Knights Templars being able to find treasure and being able to find enough to make them as rich as they become, once it's been split between them and the Cistercians and the King of Jerusalem and everyone, I feel, it's a little bit of a lost cause. But a lot of people kind of put a lot of weight on the fact that the Knights Templar essentially spent 9 years digging, looking for treasure. So what else could they have been looking for? Well, one of the things that everyone kind of jumps up and down about is the Holy Grail. Have we all heard about the Holy Grail? Yeah. Yeah. Were the knights looking for the Holy Grail? Yeah. No, afraid not. Sorry. The reason why the knights weren't looking for the Holy Grail is whilst we've got lots of stories of it in, for example, Percival, story of the Grail, various chivalric romances. All of the romances were written essentially post 1190. So a little bit after the old Knights Templars were digging around, if indeed they were digging around. So the whole concept of the Grail never appeared before then. So we assume that the concept of the Grail goes back in time forever. It doesn't. And more importantly, the guy who wrote, Christian de Toys, he was a Knights Templar himself. So, 1190, he's saying, oh yeah, there's this mysterious Grail. It's wondrous. It's holy. Whoa. But it's essentially late 12th century. So I don't think they were looking for that. The Ark of the Covenant is something else that everyone kind of puts down as were possibly the Knights Templar were looking for the Arks of the Covenant, and I have a beautiful picture there. This is a real picture, obviously, nothing to do with AI or anything, of the Ark of the Covenant down there. Again, the problem with the Ark of the Covenant, it appears in the Bible. And it appears mentioned, again, associated with Solomon's temple, and that there was a special inner room prepared to house it and receive it. And essentially, it contained the original tablets of the Ten Commandments. Where did it go? Well, problem with the Ark of the covenant is there's various stories. You can go look it up. It'll take you off into all kinds of little elements. The Ethiopians essentially believe that the ark basically spent some time in Egypt before it went to Ethiopia. Various other people believe that it was carried away into Babylon. And again, if you feel read various stories in the Bible as they don't quite agree with each other. So maybe they were looking for the ark. Did they find it? Well, we'd have kind of known, I feel. Although, historically, a lot of people have claimed that they've got the ark. It's important. I'm going to throw something in here just to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works. Has everyone seen Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. Brilliant. Well, Da Vinci Code was based essentially on the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. Now, I read the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail when I was in my teens, shortly after it came out. And the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail was very, very interesting. Well worth a read in that there's a lot of really good research in there. If you want to find out more research about the Knights Templar and the kind of dark, mysterious kind of figures hiding behind the Knights Templar, Henry Bejant, Lincoln, various people who wrote the book have done lots and lots of kind of research about it. And I think it's well researched. Whether the conclusions are right or wrong, I don't absolutely know. But something interesting that jumped out at me is that essentially the Catholic Church, of all things, teaches that pregnant Mary is a metaphorical version of the ark. Mary, in whom the Lord himself has just made his dwelling, is the daughter of Zion in person, the ark of the covenant, the place where the glory of the Lord dwells. She is the dwelling. This is the Catholic Church telling us that essentially the ark is actually just a metaphor for Mary getting pregnant. Hang on to that thought. It will be coming up later. So if we're going to have some exam questions, it will be in there. Okay, now, the problem, as I say, with the Knights Templars, big time, is, by the way, if I'm overrunning, just let me know, because I can keep going for another hour at least.
Go for as long as you like.
That's all right then, I'll keep going in that case. There we go, excellent. Now, the problem, as I say, with the Knights Templars is this. Essentially, the historians at the time didn't mention them. They didn't say, oh, these knights have popped by and they found this. They didn't say these knights have popped by and they're guarding our city. They didn't even say, the king let them stay. And this is the historian of the king himself. 50 years later, the official historian of the Knights Templar starts to say, this mysterious story. They were welcomed with open arms by the king and allowed to stay in his palace. And then all he really tells us is that they stayed there for 9 years and there was only 9 of them, whatever. The number changes, by the way. And that's it. That's where we get really, really stuck. There's lots of wonderful programs on YouTube and on Blaze and all kinds of channels and various lovely people. I'm trying to read some of the comments as well. Yes. Oh, okay. Matthew's interesting about the Earl of Framlingham. I'll talk to you about that. The Temple Mount excavations will have found Templar shields because they stayed there, I'm afraid. That's all it really tells us. So we do know they went there, and we do know they were doing something, and I've got an idea what they were doing. I'm going to get to there. It might blow your brains very slightly, but there we go. Hopefully not too much. Okay, let me just find my yes. So essentially, it's very hard to find out much about the Templars. As I say, they got very rich very quickly, so rich that the Pope allowed them essentially to not be kind of they were as good as the Pope. The only one who had any sway over them was the Pope, and all the kings and queens and all the other kind of people, basically they could swivel as far as the Templars were concerned. Indeed, more importantly, there was a letter I came across which was rather beautiful, where a king, one of the country's kings, had written to them and kind of essentially said, "Oi, you guys, you're getting a bit above your station here, you're stepping out your roots." And they basically turned around to him and said, "Well, just remember who made you king in the first place, and therefore just remember who can stop you being king." No. And essentially the power of the Templars, as you might well know, went on for a couple of 100 years, till around about 1308. And in 1308, essentially, I'll put it this way, some kings and popes grew some balls and decided they'd do something about the problem of the Templars. Now, by then, as I say, their influence was massive. If you think about it, the Templars essentially created banks, they created the check book. They kind of, like I say, ruled. They were meant to be the poor knights. There was no way they were poor. They drank heavily. They were very good at fighting. We know this. They beat people up on the battlefield, but in terms of power, it had gone to their heads. So it was decided essentially to do something about this. And in essentially 1308, we get the Inquisition, 12th of August. So you can go on to the next slide if you like. Now, the interesting thing about the Inquisition is it gives us some information. And it gives us some rather important information. Okay. I'm trying to see if I've got the, yes, excellent. Essentially, like I say, it's King Philip IV of France essentially manages to put a pope installed as a pope, Pope Clement V. Okay, and under his thumb, they essentially put an arrest warrant out and grab a load of Knights Templars, not all of them, because a few of them managed to get wind of this, confiscate their lands and their treasures, and set up this whole kind of court, this Inquisition. And what's really interesting is the charges placed against them. So this is a list of charges published by the Court of Rome, essentially, and the Acts. And it's worth reading through these because they start to give us a little bit of a hint of something relative to my talk here. So the first item on there is that each province, the order had idols, namely heads. Some of them had three faces, some had ones, and some of them were a human skull. Okay. Allegedly, they adored these idols. And allegedly, they basically adored them within their chapters in a secret kind of space. That's quite important. By the way, this isn't just one person who's kind of got up in front of the Inquisition and to save his sausage, save his life, save his skin. He's just, spouted some stuff. This essentially is a whole bunch of Knights Templars across Europe, basically saying this is what they did. And they're effectively collaborating with each other in order to try and get themselves either off the hook or on the hook or into a fire, in this case. Okay. They venerated these skulls, So we've kind of talked about people venerating skulls over thousands of years. So for some reason, this holy order of Christ, holy order that, started under the auspices of the Pope, a Christian order, they venerate skulls as God, as their savior. They say that these skulls, these heads, these idols, if you like, could save them. They could make them rich. They could make the flowers grow. They could make the land germinate. Now, bear in mind, like I say, we can find ideas of that heads, mysterious heads. Head of Bran, he was meant to be able to kind of create riches and make the land germinate and make flowers grow and stuff like that. It's an ongoing theme. And yet, this is what the Knights Templar say that they've got. They've got a head or several heads or many heads, human skulls. Okay? And that they touch the heads with cords, which then they wore around themselves. Just bear that in mind, chaps. Anyone who uses cords, wears cords as part of their regalia, should we say? This is where it comes from. Okay. And that these cords were kind of given out to each of the Knights Templar. And they did this. They were venerating. They were remembering. It was like, if you like, it's a bit like we find in churches when you find these sacraments, these heads. You want to touch them because you want to get a little bit of power or magic of them. Same thing with these cords. They wore them to have the magic of the skull, the magic of the head. Okay, and they all signed an oath not to reveal anything to anyone. Well, when you're under kind of pain, fire, torture, you'll probably tell anyone anything. But the fact that they've told them this and it all matches up, it's really interesting. And this became effectively the list of charges, or part of the list of the charges that were drawn up by the Inquisition. This was noted. So, as I say, we've already found skulls, heads across the centuries that are allegedly powerful. They do these amazing things. And Knights Templars, as I say, supposedly a Christian group of knights, also believe the same thing. It gets even more exciting. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, have you got there? Yes, you have. Excellent. Good, good, good. Yes. Caput 58M. I'm going to quote basically someone who essentially was part of the Inquisition, or c'est le procès de la Templar. Among the confiscated goods of the Paris... I'll start again, put my teeth back in. Amongst the confiscated goods of the Paris preceptory, a reliquary in the shape of a woman's head was found. There's a bit of resemblance to other stuff we've been talking about. It was hinged on top, and it contained what appeared to have been relics of a very peculiar kind. Inside, there were 2 head bones wrapped in a cloth of white linen with another red cloth around it. That should be ringing bells for some people. And there was a label on which was written the legend Caput LVIIIM, as in Caput 58M. And the bones turned out to be those of a rather small woman. This, I think, is an important thing. Hang on to that thought. Don't go away. Because, as I say, the Templars possessed various heads. And various silver heads were reliquaries. Okay. And they were given various names. Baphomet. I bet we've all heard of Baphomet, haven't we? Eliphas Levi grabbed the concept of Baphomet, ran with it, and came up with something completely different. Not a lot to do with heads, really. More to do with goats and wings and hermaphrodites and all kinds of stuff. We know that. But this is where we get the first kind of instance of the name Baphomet. As you can see, it's spelt in various different ways as well. I've just opened a folder, which I didn't want to open. Again, heads described as with a figure of Baphomet painted on them, and allegedly they were worshipped by kissing them and exclaiming "Yalla!" In one particular temple, a member of the chapter was shown a head and told to worship and adore it because this is your God, this is your Muhammad. Okay. So heads, skulls, heads, they're starting to come to the fore a bit with these guys. They're not only worshipping them, but they're giving them strange names. Baphomet and Caput 58M, right? Can we move now away from the Templars just for a few minutes? Because we have to work out what was going on. We have to work out where they were. Why skulls? Why were skulls so interesting? What was it about the skulls that they kind of revered? And why might that have given them some kind of power? Oh, funnily enough, Matthew, yes, we're going to mention skulls and crossbones in a minute. Yay. It could be a Templar throwback, as we will see. It's coming. It's going to be a really important thing. Okay, let's look at this. Just to go off track slightly, but I'm not going off track. The cult of Isis. Now, why am I mentioned the cult of Isis? Well, the cult of Isis was essentially a cult in Rome. But more importantly, it was also a cult in Jerusalem. Not many people know that. And it was essentially a cult in Jerusalem from approximately the 3rd century BCE through to about the 2nd century AD. And it was essentially modeled on Egyptian mysteries, the Isis mysteries specifically, and also the Elysian mysteries. Okay. Now, the problem about the cult of Isis, and you will see why it's going to be very, very important in a second, is that we don't again have much information about it. We do know, like I say, that it was based in Jerusalem, amongst other places. We do know that it was featured in a story called the Golden Ass, okay, which was written in the 2nd century by a chap called Apuleius, and essentially it was a work of fiction. But the work of fiction, Golden Ass, essentially kind of tells us a little bit about the Temple of Isis and the Isis mysteries, and tells us that it was very important. Anointing was very, very important. So priests would be anointed, priestesses would be anointed, and initiation was very important. And the initiation was in the inner part of the temple, or a cave, and it was a symbolic death and rebirth. Is this starting to ring any bells yet? We talked about caves, we've talked about the science of caves, we've talked about the fact that they are literally places to be reborn. They are places where we connect with the inner goddess, with the inner god, with the outer goddess and the outer god on the hill above. And they're special places for symbolic death and rebirth initiation. Okay. Isis herself, let's talk about Isis for a few seconds. She was essentially a goddess of magic, healing, the afterlife. Now, I'm going to throw something in just to tickle your fancy for a few seconds, and I don't think I need to go on to another slide yet. No, not for a second. No, yes, right. Now, the priestesses of Isis were called beloved, or beloved one. Now, we'll have all heard that phrase in various places, but specifically, they were called Mary, M-E-R-I, beloved one. Okay. This was a title. We know this from, like I say, kind of history. We know it from writings that the priestesses of Isis were called Mary. That is, if you were Mary, you were a priestess of Isis. Now, is that starting to sink in? Are we getting somewhere? Are we going to start putting a little bit of a storyline together? Okay. Now, let's go a bit biblical, shall we? Gospel of Mary, do we know that one? Probably not. One of the ones excluded from the Bible. Gospel of Philip, oh gosh, another one that was excluded from the Bible. You'll have to go and have a look in the Nag Hammadi library. Mary, in the Gospel of Philip, and Mary, is described as beloved. Isn't that interesting? Okay. So we have a Mary, a beloved one, a priestess of Isis, and she's appearing in the whole kind of 3rd century BC onwards up until about the 1st or 2nd century. I'll come back to that in a few seconds. Who was Mary? I thought to myself. Where does that name come from? Can we go to another slide, please? Da, da, da. Bound to be Egyptian, isn't she? There she is on the right-hand side. There's Mary. Mary is one of those kind of proto-goddesses, essentially. And she was the wife of Happy. There he is on the left-hand side, which is very interesting. So, we might as well bring in Grumpy and the rest of the dwarfs, but we don't. So Mary and Happy and Mary. These, like I say, this is going back a long way before Isis. Proto-gods and goddesses. The funny thing about it is that if you have a look at Happy as closely as you dare, you might notice that Happy, Happy has a little bit of a prominent or pregnant belly. Can you see that? Happy, who's meant to be, like I say, a god, has drooping breasts. And Happy also has a beard, but it's a false beard. Now, we're starting to get into some very interesting territory here. Happy was a proto-god, the creator god, if you like, or creator god Rex. Is there a god X? Yes, there probably is now. Creator kind of there with a beard, with a false beard. One of the things about, by the way, the Knights Templar that no one could figure out is why the Knights Templars all had to wear beards. I don't know if you knew that. They were required, as part of their being a Knight Templar, they had to have a beard. And here's why, because essentially the Egyptian gods and goddesses even had beards. You see it everywhere. We all know every pharaoh you see has got a false beard, if not a beard. And there's the thing. So we're kind of finding a few links now into what the Knights Templar were about. There was something to do with an Egyptian cult. There was something to do with Happy and Merry. Are we starting to kind of get some ideas now? Oh, by the way, yes, Happy. Let's talk about Happy for a few more seconds. Apart from being the father, we'll call the Father X, the whatever of all gods, they lived in a cave at the source of the Nile. So we've got our caves coming back in again, where we started off the whole of this kind of talk and demo, caves. Okay. So I wondered to myself, did the Egyptians worship skulls? Did they worship heads? Were skulls and heads part of, shall we say, the mysteries of Isis? So more research, more digging around. Shall we pop down to the next slide, please? There we have the answer, pretty much. Essentially, whilst if you go hunting around and ask AI, it'll say no. However, head binding, skull elongation, various things being practiced all over the world for thousands, tens of thousands of years. And we certainly find Egyptian skulls that have been kind of reshaped, if you like. So the skulls were quite important. Osiris, we're back to Isis for a second. Osiris, who was essentially the partner of Isis, was basically murdered by Set and was dismembered. His head was cut off and his body was hidden away. If you remember us talking about the old church where they cut the heads off and throw the bodies away, this happened to Osiris. Rather interestingly enough, a little bit later in the story, his wife Isis manages to get all of his body parts back together, apart from one rather important thing, which is replaced by something else. And essentially, she manages to essentially mate with him and gives birth to Horus. Now, the funny thing is, when you look at stories of Isis and Horus, Isis also has a head cut off. So we've got a little bit of head cutting off going on in the Egyptians. So they're not just, the Egyptians, there's a bit of head cutting and head worshipping and things going on. And it was replaced by the head of a skull. There we go. Now, something else I found, which is really, really interesting, as we well know, during mummification, essentially, the really important internal organs were removed and stored in canopic jars. However, the brain was basically thrown away. So all the archaeologists have essentially said, oh, well, they obviously didn't figure the brain was really important because the soul resided in the heart and all this kind of stuff. So, they basically, if you want the whole way it worked, is they stuffed a very sharp thing into the nasal cavity and twisted it around until they basically pulped up the brain. And then, as we find out, the brain was taken out and just, cast to one side. I got thinking about this, and I wondered, if you have just a skull, as we have in this picture here on our right-hand side, the lovely skull there, without its brain inside, we have essentially a cavity. And that cavity acts as a resonator, okay? And basically, as we found out very early on in our slides, we know that essentially it conducts, because of its makeup, it conducts electromagnetic energy, waves, if you like. And because it's a cavity and it's essentially conducting those waves, it will also resonate those waves and essentially create a magic item that conducts electricity and focus that electricity, that electromagnetism, on a very specific point. Now, I'm not going to do an experiment with this one because I haven't quite devised it yet, and it would require me having a skull to do a couple of tests on this one. So if anyone wants to donate their skull for scientific reasons, please let me know. But essentially, as I've written in there, you'll get a resonant frequency, specific resonant frequency. And by the way, if you can see there, I've kind of guessed roughly where that resonant frequency would work. And if the brain was in the middle of all of that, you can see on the left-hand side, it would focus on the pineal gland. Surprise, surprise. If the brain's missing, then you've basically got this hollow thing, and you can kind of cast your mind into a little bit of Indiana Jones and the skulls and all kinds of things, and basically go off in whatever direction you want to. But my kind of concept idea on that is, like I say, it wasn't that they were throwing the brain away. It was that actually the skull was important, and the brain would rot anyway. So they were essentially storing the skull as an important device, a magical tool, if you like. Okay. Let's have a quick look at another slide. I've got a few more, if you want to bear with me, as it were. Okay, on the left-hand side, essentially what we've got there is an ankh, a jed, and a scepter of power. Okay. Now the jed itself, that middle one there, it's a sacred stone, sacred pillar, and it represents essentially the spine of Osiris. And you can see the spinal column if you have a look at the top there, with a kind of a tiny head, maybe not, on the top. The right-hand side is a magic wand, and that ties into dragons, essentially, and serpents. I'm not going to go there, but it kind of ties right back into our examination of sacred landscape. But what I thought was very, very, very interesting was, and I'm going to come back to this picture again in a little bit, I think, if I've remembered to put it in there. If we take the top off the ankh, as you can see like that, we end up with a tau cross. Tile cross, very important. It might look like another cross if anyone wants to. I've just seen what you're on about, and no one's volunteered their skull. I'm a bit shocked. If we put some horns on top of there, so we're thinking back to our story about Isis getting her head chopped off and getting it replaced by a bull. So bull horns, that's a sign of Taurus. Some of you will recognize that. And we pop it back onto our cross. We end up with Mercury. And Mercury, hermaphrodite, ties back to our hermaphrodite happy. So we've got all kinds of wonderful kind of links in here. We could go off for miles and miles and miles. And by the way, hermaphrodite was the child of Hermes and Aphrodite. Ooh, anyway, let's hang around there and move on for a few seconds. Can we go to the next slide again? It's a bit more Indiana Jones, I think. Da, 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 da. Okay, so let's look at caves for a few seconds. Now, we know just by archaeological kind of discoveries that essentially caves have been used for rituals forever, pretty much throughout history. And the Roman period is very interesting because, again, there's documentation of caves being used for regional ritualistic purposes. including we can find it in the Mishnah, which goes back to 500 to 300 BCE. We can find it in the Talmud. We can find it in a trial of 60 witches, and in the writings of, it's pretty much everywhere. There's loads and loads of evidence. We can stack and pack all of that. Basically, that effectively caves were used for rituals, for magic. And ancient Greek sources specifically talk of caves being used for necromancy. And they talk about using skulls in caves. There we go. We're getting slightly interesting now. And specifically how lamps would be used to effectively combine with the skulls to cast shadows, to communicate messages from spirits. So here's the question. Did the priestesses of Isis, and we know, as I say, they were hanging around Rome around about 300 BCE up to at least 100, 200 AD. Were they practicing necromancy as part of their rites? Were they really, really interested in caves? Were they interested in skulls? Their name Mary, and we're kind of stacking stuff that I don't know how related it is. We're going to try and pull it all together. And my question really is, was this related to what the Knights Templar were looking for? Had they found something out? Had they discovered, had they figured something out about the priestesses of Isis called Mary? That they were using skulls in their rites? Did they take this on board as part of their rites, their magic, their rituals? Let's have a little look further. Can we go to the next slide, please? Righty-ho. Now we're going back to Jerusalem here. Very important, Jerusalem. Okay. If you have a look at the map, I'm trying to relate into it. You can see just there at the, I can't see, but you might be able to see the brown bit at the bottom of the Temple of Solomon is essentially the coloured in kind of brown bit on the middle right-hand side of the city. And the bottom of the Temple of Solomon is where the stables were. And this is where the Knights Templars took over and resided for a little while. So what were they doing there? We have to kind of have a look around at the landscape and try and start to get some ideas. So to the west of the stables, we find a whole bunch of tombs. So maybe they were looking there because essentially in there we find a tomb of the Virgin. Ooh. And the tomb and Gethsemane, allegedly. Now, some people think that's where they were looking and that's, you know, where they were digging around. And they could well have been. Did they find anything? Don't know. Some people I've seen recently, again, on that wonderful show on Blaze, several wonderful shows on Blaze, have kind of looked at the caves to the north end of the city. The caves that are called, I'll have to look it up for a second, Zedekiah's Cave, also known as Solomon's Quarries. So there's kind of a concept that these caves were connected all the way under the city and all the way under Solomon's Temple. As you might notice, they're not. They're actually quite a short set of caves comparatively. They were carved over a period of several hundred years, several thousands of years actually, and they were basically a quarry. So they went way back before Knights Templars. So Knights Templars didn't dig them out. That's a bit of a fallacy that's been kind of passed around. They might well have had a bit of a dig in there, just have a quick look, but they wouldn't have found it a lot. The Well of Souls. Now, the Well of Souls, if you look at your map, is pretty much in the middle of the temple area. This is interesting. Were the Knights Templars digging around the Well of Souls? Well, essentially, the Well of Souls is, well, old, very old, way before the Knights Templars, so it wasn't dug by them. And it's partly a natural cave and it's partly a man-made cave. And essentially, it's found under the foundation stone of the Dome of Rock, which is what we now know as the Temple Mount. So the temple in Jerusalem has been owned by many people and has been knocked down and rebuilt and knocked down and rebuilt. But underneath it sits this Well of Souls. And allegedly the Well of Souls was called so because, you know, you could hear the spirits of the dead in there. And funnily enough, during the Crusades, the Crusaders knew it as the Holy of Holies. And it was venerated as the site of the Archangel's announcement of John the Baptist's birth. Now, the Archangel in question is Gabriel. And Gabriel kind of features in our story. I don't want to go into Gabriel's story because else we end up in a whole kind of quagmire of René Le Chateau and various kind of modern day-ish comparatively kind of mysteries with the priest Sonia and various things going on there. But the fact that they're linked turns out to be rather interesting. But like I say, takes us off in a little bit of a journey into the middle of nowhere. Now, Golgotha, Calvary. We've all heard of them. We know them because someone went through a little bit of a ritual up there, didn't they? A little bit of a ritual. Now, Golgotha basically means place of the skull. Are we getting interested? If you have a look at the very top left-hand picture, there's Golgotha again. We've seen him before. We've seen him again. You can whiz back and to from various pictures. Golgotha, place of the skull. Allegedly, the place where Jesus was crucified. So, can you see the story that's starting to work in here? We have a death and a rebirth. We have an initiation process upon a hill that is named after a skull. If you look at it, it's a bit skull-like, hence maybe the name. But maybe it was a place where a skull might have been kept as part of the Isis myths, as part of the beliefs of the Isisians. Maybe that was part of their ritual. Maybe the ritual involved a little bit of a ritual death, and then the person would be taken from the top of the hill down into the cave, and then there would be a ritual rebirth a few days later, maybe. Now, if you think about the story, who appears in the story loads? Mary! And what have we found out about the name Mary? Priestess. Priestess of Isis. So, some people have discounted the concept that Mary might be a priestess of Isis because they go, oh yeah, there's loads of Marys in the Bible. Well, there are quite a lot of Marys in the Bible. We could list them. If you're going to have a priesthood, you're not going to have just one priestess of Isis, are you? Called Mary. You're going to have several priestesses of Isis, and they're all going to be called Mary because that's a title, not a name. Much in the same way as Christos means anointed one. It ain't his name. He wasn't Jesus Christ. That wasn't like, dear Mr. Christ, we'd like to talk to you about Mithraism. No, it didn't work like that. Christos was literally the anointed one. We found stories. We already know he was anointed. We already know this isn't, I'm not coming up with new stuff particularly here. What I'm throwing in is a few extra dimensions. The few extra dimensions are that Mary was a priestess of Isis. One of several priestesses, because several priestesses of Isis called Mary anointed Jesus at least twice, if not possibly more. So he was anointed a couple of times, anointed one. He was tended to. In fact, his mother was called Mary. Was his mother a priestess of Isis? Giving you a clue there, giving you a hint. We're going to come back to that. I'll throw you another one in just to add a little bit. We talked about John the Baptist earlier on and Salome. Salome's mother, Salome's grandmother was also called Mary. So Salome was probably part of the priesthood as well. So are we getting bored yet? Do you want some more? Because we can carry on. It gets even more exciting than that. Basically, what's quite important is, like I say, this skull hill looks like a skull. Okay. What we find is that there is a cave there, and that essentially there was a anchor cross carved outside. And also there's been excavations around the area that show that it might have been a garden round about time of Christ, basically. And also pottery and lamps have been found dating from about 500 BC to 34 AD. So we've got lamps popping up again. Do you remember lamps? You probably don't. No, lamps. We're going to talk about lamps in a few seconds. Okay. So the thing is, here we go. We've got our Knights Templar. We've got our Knights Templar hooked on skulls. Maybe the Knights Templar figured out that Mary was actually not, this kind of person who gave birth to Christ, or was not, just someone who anointed him, but was actually his high priestess. And that what we're reading in the Bible is essentially a story that is basically an initiation story on a hill, Skull Hill, which could have been involving skulls. Now, the problem is that when the Knights Templar were looking 1,000 years later, they wouldn't have found skulls. I can tell you that for a fact. And I can tell you why they wouldn't have found a skull, and why, therefore, no one looking nowadays would have found a skull and added the skull into the process. Because, essentially, whilst we know that skulls were used in rituals, been mentioned, been talked about by various annotators, various narrators of the time, we know also that the Roman Empire essentially banned the use of skulls, so therefore we know it was there, and death magic and necromancy somewhere around about 130-ish AD. Okay? It was banned. It was kicked out. You can't do that anymore in Jerusalem. You got to go elsewhere. Well, they weren't told to go elsewhere. They were just told to stop. But of course, what do? They go elsewhere. And here's our problem. Our trail has gone a little bit cold. All we can say at this particular second is that we know there was a priesthood of Mary. We know that there were skulls involved somewhere in the process. We know that the Knights Templars started worshipping skulls, quite, why? They were talking skulls. They'd get information from them. They'd get prophecies of the future. They'd give them abundance, maybe enough abundance to essentially become very, very, very important. Or maybe the abundance was from something else. Maybe the abundance was from knowledge that they were able to use, knowledge that they were able to take. But the problem is, we can't prove that there was a skull involved, because the Skull Hill, essentially, we found some lamps, found some pottery, but no skulls. Well, that's an issue. We know, like I say, the Templars had a skull, at least one, but none there. And so apparently our trail goes a little bit cold. And I would normally stop now and say thank you very much for listening. However, the thing about the internet, it's very wonderful. When you go hunting for things, all kinds of things pop up, and you find all kinds of things that other people wouldn't necessarily find, or indeed wouldn't necessarily have put the two together. So let's go to the next slide. Here we have something called the Tiamin Cave. Okay. We're only about 10 sides from the end now. I'm going to do the whole lot, and you can just record it and replay it and rewatch it at your own expense. So, have you found that cave? Yes. Here is a wonderful little cave. Okay. Essentially, it sits about 15, 16 miles away from Jerusalem. Now, guess what archaeologists found in there relatively recently? I say recently, probably about 10 years ago. They found 120 oil lamps, 3 skulls, and various pottery shards and other stuff. But take that in mind. Oil lamps and skulls. Oil lamps and skulls. Now, that cave has always been associated with magic and rituals. In fact, going back to the 1900s, it was called the Cave of the Mother of Twins because there were healing powers. And we can tell from the placement that these were used. These were used in special rituals. And now if you kind of put the two together just for a second, our storyline basically suggests that there were priestesses in Jerusalem, probably priestesses of Isis, and suggests that some priestesses who used skulls were kicked out. We're told you can't do that anymore. And of course, in the meantime, so do I, yes. In the meantime, we find this cave a little bit away, where we find skulls. Are you starting to see the picture now? Imagine just for a second that we're not the first people to find a skull there. Imagine there's this mysterious cave that rituals were practiced. Skulls were used. And the Knights Templars go and find a skull. That would add to their story, wouldn't it? Particularly if their story was all about Mary, Isis. Their story was all about skulls. Their story was all about necromancy. And their story was all about lamps. Lamps were important, by the way. Isis was known as the lady or mistress of the flame. So there's our link there. She was, if you like, as you can see from that lovely little picture there, she was effectively defender of Osiris, destroyer of his enemies, mistress of flames. Okay. So I'm going to jump now because I feel like I've been talking for several hours and I feel a pint of beer is calling me. My concept is this, and I can expand on it and I can do loads more stuff. And my concept of this is very, very simple. You can go to the next. I've lost you. You ran somewhere. Next slide, anyway. Oh, there you are. Yes, there we go. You've made it to there. Okay. The thing about this is as ever, you have to kind of draw evidence where you can. You have to start putting evidence together. We've got initiation rites. We've got priestesses. We've got the Hill of the Skull. We've got Kaput LVAIIM. By the way, no one knows what Kaput 58M means, except I kind of vaguely think I know what it means. We've got necromancy going on. We've got initiation going on. And as quite rightly, we've got all this kind of magical energy. The skulls themselves are magical tools. And they were indeed venerated by later groups of people. So if we kind of move forwards in time, we can kind of dive into Masons and all kinds of places and find skulls. 58, it becomes an important number, and Ka, as in Kaput, basically is Egyptian for the vital essence of the person, and Ba, as in Baphomet, is the personality of the person. So I can go into those in great depth, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to jump to one more story. Can we go to the next slide, please? There we go. Skulls and crossbones. This is what you wanted, isn't it? I can tell you a little story, basically. And this is the skull of Sidon. And it kind of ties things together, as do a lot of things. I'll read it out as it stands. This is how it was written. A great lady of Magickal was loved by a Templar. Now, it's probable that this story originated before the Templars and they took it on. And it kind of got quoted in the Inquisition. Basically, she died when she was young. And on the night of her burial, this Templar kind of really was very naughty. He essentially dug up her body and violated it. Okay. A voice from the void, as he was about to kind of fill the hole back in, said, "You will return in 9 months and you will find a son." Scary stuff. So basically, he did just that. He buried the body. He came back in about 9 months' time and reopened the grave. And guess what he found? He found a head on the leg bones of a skeleton, their skull and crossbones. And he was told to guard it well, for it would be the giver of all things. And essentially, it became his protection. He was able to defeat his enemies by merely showing them the magic head. And there we go. And apparently it passed to the possession of the order. Isn't that an interesting story? It's probably, like I say, been adapted by the Templars, but it does reflect the story of Isis and Osiris and him essentially coming back to life from the dead in order to give her Horus, which we really like. As you well know, there's a rite of Freemasonry called Memento Mori. So this is where we head up into the skull and crossbones, and essentially the candidate is asked to consider death and presented with a skull in a darkened chamber. Righty-ho. I'm going to throw two more things in very quickly. Can we go to the next slide, please?
You're fine.
That's right. I need to finish because I haven't even eaten yet. Here we go. So I started looking around going, I wonder, bellies, pregnant. We just talked about pregnancy. We've mentioned pregnancy a few times. Do we find any pregnant hills? Well, unfortunately, not many. There's Mamtor and Derbyshire, as you can see there. But the important thing is Goblipi Tempi. I didn't pronounce that very right. I'm terribly sorry. I'll try and pronounce that again. Anyway. The funny thing is, it's been recently kind of got into the news for anyone who's into this kind of stuff, because it is a cradle of civilization and goes back thousands and thousands of years. And the real name of it, if we translate it into English, is Belly Hill. And guess what we find in there? Loads of skulls, various skulls and models of skulls and carved skulls, you name it. Skulls and more skulls. Okay. Next slide, very quickly. Dome of the Rock, Temple Mount, Jerusalem. Essentially, this was meant to be, this is going back into where the Knights Templars were based. Essentially, this was another legend of where the world was created, the center of everything. And essentially, again, belly buttons, bellies, belly button of the world, the Omphalos, Egyptian kind of creation myths popping up like crazy with Ben and Waters of Chaos and Nu and all kinds of stuff and pyramids. I'm not going to go into that because that's another talk, really. But let's have a look at the next slide 34 on my list, very quickly, please. Yay! There we go. So very interestingly, I don't know if you can see this, back to Mary. Since at least the 16th century, possibly before, and Mary essentially has been represented in art with skulls. She had a skull. Hey, there's interesting. Where did that come from? Okay, jump down to the next slide. Oh, God, I'm not going to talk about this because it's going to take me too long. I'm going to throw one more thing, essentially two more things. Jump to the next slide. Great stuff. So, thought to throw at you very quickly. Essentially, at the birth of a certain child, Mary was presented by essentially anointing oils. Imagine if this is the end of the story, not the beginning of the story. Maybe after our kind of sacrifice and maybe after our rebirth, we end up with a birth, a pregnancy. Maybe it's a cycle of pregnancies. Get pregnant from Mary, the whole kind of link into our priestesses, go through the birthing, the new child then gets anointed, and we have a whole bloodline thing going on. Woo! Last slide, please. Are you still there? Yes, last slide. There's loads of stuff in here. The one to look at is top left-hand corner up there, that skull up there. Went to the Witchcraft Museum recently. Really like this. That's Harriet. Basically, Harriet is a skull. I'm not going to go into it in great detail. She was found in a Bible box in a London church, basically. The funny thing about Harriet is she turns out, after a little bit of examination and being x-rayed, to be Egyptian. They managed to trace her genetics and essentially going back to about 50 years BC. I don't know if she's linked in or not, but I really like the fact that I found her at the weekend and she kind of feels as though she ties into our story. So there we go. Summarize Mary. Mary, as we say, priestess of Isis, involved with a whole kind of rebirth and anointing cult, cult of Isis in Jerusalem. We have a story in the Bible that turns out to be more about initiation and rebirth. And we have all the characters popping up. And so if that hasn't blown your head away a lot, we have the Knights Templar who seem to have known a number of things about this, maybe even found a bit of skull, i.e. Caput 58M, and maybe even use that information to turn up at the Pope's place and say, hey, Pope, we've got some stuff that you might like here. We won't tell anyone if you don't. But just to make sure that you're really, really safe, we're going to layer loads of information on all of our churches. So we'll put skulls all over the place, and we'll put Marys all over the place, and we'll put chalices all over the place. Oh, and we'll put our cross all over the place, which is derivation from the angry, you name it. It's absolutely everywhere. Pardon? Enough. Absolutely enough. Enough. I've been told enough by Jenny. She says stop, and I'm stopping.
Yeah, we should have done this in 2 parts.
I thought about that, but whilst I had connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't see it. Anyway,
it's all good. No, it's been fascinating. It's been so really fascinating. Yes, and my gosh, there's just so much stuff to think about again now. Oh, every time.
So next time I can do it in 2 parts, and you can get it slowly and coherently, and more importantly, you can make head or tail of it, because there's a lot of information in there. There's loads I haven't included that basically kind of supports the narrative.
Well, let's do another one then, a part 2 with all the bits and pieces, and then say you need to watch part 1. And then we'll add everything all in together. Yeah, let's do another one. Okay, yeah, no, but it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much once again for giving us such amazing information. And no, it's been absolutely fascinating. I did say, is there any questions? But there doesn't seem to be. So I'll ask one more time. Do you have any questions? Anybody?
I'll tell you what, if you want to ask me questions, email me, message me, find me on Facebook, all those kind of things. Oh, we'll come back.
Add them in. Yeah, we're going to do another one anyway, yes?
Okay, yeah. Let's do another one, and we'll do a questions and answer one. And we'll start at the end and work to the beginning next time.
Oh, so Matthew's asking skull and bones, question mark.
Yeah, skull and bones comes basically out of the whole kind of skull and crossbones. I won't go there now because I do
need
to go.
The first thing, yeah, me too. But the first thing I thought about when the skull and crossbones came up was the pirates, because they used that, didn't they? So
yeah, Templars used it as part of their kind of flags and things, and yes, pirates have kind of adopted since then. There's links from Templars to pirates, all kinds of stuff. There's links from Templars to everyone once you start getting into it.
Yeah, another rabbit hole. Okay.
Yeah. This is what I find, so many rabbit holes, and you start going down them, and some of them are really useful, some of them lead nowhere, and some of them lead to too many places.
Exactly,
right.
Yeah.
I really am going to have to go.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let's talk about doing another one, a part 2.
We'll have a wee chat later.
Yes. Okay.
All right then. Thanks. Love you. Thank you so much.
That's all right. Okay. See you soon.
Bye. Well, let me get rid of this one as well and just have my beautiful face. Not my beautiful face, but hey. Right. Thank you so much for joining, whoever's left. That was a long talk, right? But if you're still here, thank you so much. But it was bloody marvellous. And yes, we're going to get him on again to do the extra stuff, which will be mind-blowing again. And we'll have lots more stuff. So if anybody's got any questions, you can just stick them in the comments. And I will do my best to pick them all up for the next talk. That'll be great. Please don't forget, hold on, before you go, don't forget, please like and subscribe to the channel, because it's only that people liking and subscribing and making this channel grow, that is actually going to help us get these people chatting and get everybody in a big community. We want this community to grow. That was the whole point of doing the monthly mystical, is to get everybody from all magical sources yapping and chatting and having a good time, and we'll have and just coming together as a magical community, rather than everybody being, oh, I'm you, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. But yeah, so that we can all, and then we can grow and we can learn from each other. That's the whole point. So I'll stop rabbiting as well, and I shall see you all very soon on the, oh, hang on, when's the next one? Can't remember. But obviously you'll know through Facebook, through YouTube, through Instagram. Please do like, subscribe to everything I'm on, if you would please. That would be great. And I shall see you on the next one. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you soon. Lots of love. Bye.